Welcome to another episode of PPL Pod. I want you to imagine something for a second. Um, Imagine being the mastermind behind the soundtrack of an entire generation.
Right, which is a pretty massive claim right out of the gate.
It totally is, but just stick with me. So, you're in your mid-20s, and you have already written well over 100 Billboard hits.
Just an unbelievable volume of work.
Exactly. You have literally shaped the way millions of people experience love and heartbreak and joy. But despite all that towering, world-shaking success, you are absolutely terrified to step up to the microphone yourself.
Like, genuinely paralyzed by the idea.
Yes. You are perfectly happy to build these massive orchestral pop anthems for everyone else, but the thought of singing them yourself, it's just a non-starter.
It is a profound, almost, the tragic tension, really.
Huh?
You are out there giving the entire world its voice, but you are systematically hiding your own.
It makes me think of like a legendary ghostwriter, someone who pens these massive global bestsellers, just absolute cultural blockbusters, but they're completely afraid to put their own name on the cover.
Oh, that's a perfect way to frame it.
Because, have you ever stayed in a comfortable behind-the-scenes job just because you were terrified of the spotlight? That is exactly where our subject was stuck.
And honestly, a lot of people probably would have just stayed there.
Right. But today, we are taking a deep dive into a massive stack of sources. We're talking historical music archives, Billboard chart data, incredibly candid memoirs, to figure out how someone actually overcomes that paralysis.
Because it is not an easy jump to make.
Not at all. The mission of this deep dive is to map that agonizing, courageous journey from the shadows straight to center stage.
And looking through these sources, it is genuinely one of the most fascinating psychological and artistic stories in modern culture. We're unpacking the life of Carole King.
Yeah, and to put her impact into plain language for you, Carole King is not just someone who participated in 20th century music. She's a foundational pillar of it.
Without doubt.
We are talking about 118 songs on the Billboard Hot 100, 75 million records sold worldwide, and a phenomenally rare double induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Which, getting in once is a miracle. Twice is just absurd.
Right. But we aren't just here to recite her stats, because you probably already know she's a legend. Why this deep dive matters is because her personal evolution is actually the blueprint for the evolution of modern music itself.
She literally charts the course. She takes us right from the highly manufactured, pristine assembly line pop of the early 1960s straight into the raw, emotionally messy singer-songwriter era of the 1970s.
Yeah.
She didn't just witness that cultural shift. She was the engine driving it.
But looking at her trajectory, I do have to push back a little on how seamless it looks in retrospect.
Oh, sure. It always looks cleaner looking back.
Right, because how unusual is it, mechanically speaking, for an artist to have two entirely distinct world-dominating careers, first as a behind-the-scenes hitmaker, and then decades later as a solo superstar?
It's incredibly rare.
Because usually those are two entirely different skill sets, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. It is almost unheard of to reach the absolute pinnacle of the industry in both roles. Usually, the people behind the curtain stay there because they excel at structure, and the people on the stage couldn't write a hit hook if their lives depended on it.
Yeah, they're completely different animals.
Exactly. And to understand how she bridged that impossible gap, we have to understand the ecosystem she started in. We really have to look at the late 1950s and early 1960s, specifically a place called 1650 Broadway in New York City.
Ah, the legendary Brill Building sound era.
Yes, exactly.
But, reading through the accounts of this place, I really want to challenge the romanticized idea of mid-century songwriting.
How so?
Well, when you look at the daily operations of 1650 Broadway, it sounds way more like a software coding sweatshop of the 1960s than some, bohemian artistic pursuit.
That's a perfect analogy, actually.
Right, because they were literally writing the source code for pop culture in these tiny, cramped cubicles.
A literal hit factory. Songwriters treated music like a brutal 9-to-5 corporate job. You clocked in, you went to a tiny windowless room with a piano, and you worked all day to manufacture pop standards for other artists to sing.
Just grinding it out.
Yeah. You had publishers walking down the halls, listening through the doors, demanding a hit for a specific artist by 5:00 p.m. It was an ecosystem designed entirely to churn out commercial product.
Which begs the question, how on earth does a creative genius thrive in a cubicle like that? It sounds completely oppressive.
It does sound awful, but I would actually counter that it was the ultimate training ground. because those intense constraints, they breed a very specific type of creativity.
Like forced innovation.
Exactly. Writing 9 to 5 forces you to learn the actual mechanics of a hit. You learn how to build an unbreakable A-B song structure, how to craft a hook that burrows into a listener's brain, and how to write universally appealing lyrics.
So it's reps, just getting the reps in.
Right. And for Carole King, that structure served her perfectly, because her extraordinary natural talent had always been shaped by practical necessity.
Yeah, the sources really highlight that working class practicality. She was born Carol Joan Klein to Jewish parents in Brooklyn. Both of her parents had actually dropped out of college during the Great Depression.
Just a really tough time for everyone.
Yeah, so her father became a firefighter, her mother ran the household. Art for art's sake just wasn't on the menu for them. Practical survival was in her blood.
But the musical talent couldn't be ignored,
Yeah.
right? And it showed up incredibly early. When she was just 3 years old, she developed this insatiable curiosity about music.
3 years old.
Yeah, 3. Her mother, who played the piano, started teaching her the basics. And by age 4, they discovered she had absolute pitch.
Okay, let's break down what that actually means, because it's not just having a good ear.
No, it's way beyond that.
Having absolute pitch means you can hear a car horn blowing in the street and instantly know it's a B flat. You perceive musical notes the way the rest of us perceive colors.
Precisely. Music wasn't just something she learned. It was her fundamental language.
Yeah.
And the memoirs paint this vivid picture of her at 4 years old, climbing up onto the piano stool, literally using a phone book as a booster seat,
Oh.
and just absorbing complex music theory from her mother. She was academically brilliant, too. She skipped first grade entirely. And by the time she was a teenager in the 1950s, she wasn't just playing, she was hustling.
Oh, yeah. She formed a band, changed her name to Carole King, and started making demo records with her friend Paul Simon for $25 a session.
Which is wild to think about.
Just 2 kids from New York who would eventually define American music, cutting tracks for pocket change. But, the transition from being a teenage prodigy to a professional hitmaker in that Brill Building ecosystem, it wasn't some slow, deliberate career choice.
No, it was a very sudden, jarring shift forced by real life.
Right. The stakes changed overnight.
At age 17, while attending Queens College, she became pregnant. She married her songwriting partner, Jerry Goffin. And suddenly, they had a family to support.
So the hobby becomes a necessity.
Exactly. They both quit college. They took daytime jobs. Goffin worked as an assistant chemist. King worked as a secretary. And they just wrote songs together at night.
It wasn't about youthful expression anymore. It was literally about paying the rent. But before we get to their massive breakthrough, I have to bring up the Neil Sedaka story.
Oh, this is such a great story.
Because it feels like a high school drama that somehow spilled onto the global charts.
It is a bizarre and wonderful piece of pop history. So Sedaka, who King had actually dated in high school, wrote a top 10 hit song in 1959, explicitly about her, simply titled, Ugh, Carole.
And the response to that is what completely blows my mind.
Yeah, it's so petty in the best way.
Right. Her husband, Jerry Goffin, writes a playful, almost sarcastic answer song called Oh, Neil, which Carole actually records and releases.
And it was a complete commercial failure.
Yeah.
Just totally flopped.
Totally. But here is the critical mechanical detail. That flop of a song is what got them in the door at Alden Music, right in the heart of that 1650 Broadway hit factory.
Yeah, it functioned as a calling card. And once they were inside that highly pressurized ecosystem, they exploded. In 1960, they wrote Will You Love Me Tomorrow for the Shirelles.
Which is a massive cultural milestone.
Huge. It was the first #1 hit by a black girl group.
And if we look at the musical mechanics of that song, it's brilliant. I mean, it's an upbeat pop tempo, but the chord progression and the lyrics are incredibly vulnerable and melancholy.
Yeah, it's not a simple, happy pop song.
Not at all. It perfectly captures the terrifying, questioning nature of teenage intimacy in the early 60s.
That tension between the upbeat pop delivery and the deeply insecure lyrics was their trademark. That song became a defining standard.
It changed everything for them.
It really did. It allowed King and Goffin to finally quit those day jobs as a secretary and a chemist and just focus entirely on the assembly line of writing. And throughout the 1960s, their output is just staggering.
Yeah, like Up on the Roof for the Drifters, One Fine Day for the Chiffons. You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman for Aretha Franklin.
They were so tapped into the commercial matrix that they even wrote a massive #1 hit for their babysitter.
Wait, really? Their babysitter?
Yes. They literally wrote the Loco-Motion for Little Eva, and it conquered the world. It proves that King could write a hit for absolutely anyone.
That is insane. But, while the professional machine was humming flawlessly, the sources show that her personal world was entirely fracturing.
Yeah, it was all falling apart behind the scenes. By 1968, King and Goffin were divorced. And this is a crucial turning point because her entire creative ecosystem was built around that marriage.
Right. The Brill Building model required that tight, reliable partnership.
Exactly. Without Goffin, the corporate environment of 1650 Broadway became creatively suffocating for her.
So she doesn't just change writing partners, she changes her entire reality. She flees the gray, structured, corporate hit factory world of New York, and she moves across the country to California with her two daughters. She lands in Laurel Canyon, Los Angeles.
And this geographic shift is also a massive cultural shift. Laurel Canyon in the late 60s was becoming this bohemian enclave, heavily populated by artists who were actively dismantling the pristine pop structures King had helped invent.
They were going for something completely different.
Right, they were experimenting with a much more relaxed, authentic, stripped-down sound.
And King tries to adapt to this. She forms a music trio there called The City, with bassist Charles Larkey, who she later marries, and guitarist Danny Korchmar.
Yeah, they gave it a real shot.
They put out an album in 1968, but it completely fails. And what's fascinating is that it didn't fail because the music was bad.
No, the critical reception was actually quite warm. The critics liked it.
So why did it fail?
It failed because of King's deep, paralyzing reluctance to perform live. Because she flat out refused to get on a stage, they couldn't promote the record.
Oh, wow. So no touring, no TV spots.
Exactly. Sales stalled, and the group quickly disbanded. She was still profoundly terrified of the spotlight.
So we have to ask the central question of this deep dive. What finally forces someone who is that terrified out of the shadows? Because reading through these accounts, her eventual solo breakout doesn't feel like a calculated career move.
No, not at all.
It feels like an act of emotional survival.
I think that's the only way to look at it.
Okay.
She was heavily pushed by her peers in Laurel Canyon, specifically people like James Taylor and Jenny Mitchell.
Not a bad group of friends to have pushing you.
Right. They heard her playing her own songs in her living room and basically told her, you have to stop giving these away. They pushed her to start recording her own voice.
And so she does.
Yeah. In 1970, she released her debut solo album, Writer. It peaked at number 84. So it wasn't a smash, but it broke the seal.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the cultural earthquake of 1971, Tapestry.
Oh, Tapestry.
Let's look at the sheer terrifying scale of what this album achieved. It stayed at #1 on the Billboard charts for 15 consecutive weeks.
15 weeks.
It lingered on the charts for over 6 years, and it has sold over 30 million copies worldwide.
And critically, it dismantled the Grammy Awards. King became the first woman ever to win Song of the Year for You've Got a Friend.
It's just monumental.
But what's really important is why it resonated so deeply. Musically, Tapestry is the anti-Brill Building.
Yes, let's talk about that production. She completely strips away the wall of sound. There are no massive, sweeping orchestras.
None. It's incredibly intimate. The microphones are placed close. It's mostly just her, a piano, and a very sparse rhythm section.
It literally sounds like she's sitting in your living room singing directly to you.
That intimacy was revolutionary for the time. And we have to highlight the beautiful symbiotic relationship with James Taylor going on at exactly the same time.
Yeah, their careers were so intertwined there.
Completely. They were recording their albums concurrently, literally sharing the exact same overlapping set of studio musicians. Taylor played acoustic guitar on Tapestry, and King played piano on his album Mudslide Slim.
And Taylor actually took his own recording of King's You've Got a Friend to #1 at the exact same time Tapestry was dominating the album charts.
It's this incredible moment of artistic mutual support.
And it all culminates in May 1973 when King performs a free concert in Central Park for an estimated 100,000 people.
Just think about that arc.
Right. She goes from being paralyzed by the microphone to commanding an audience the size of a small city.
The world fully embraced her vulnerability.
But, I want to pause here for a second because it's very easy to view this as a tidy, triumphant Hollywood ending.
Oh, definitely.
And the sources reveal a really jarring contradiction. We see her writing and performing some of the world's most comforting, reassuring music songs that are healing a fractured nation, while she is simultaneously navigating a personal life that was profoundly unsafe.
It is so hard to read about.
Yeah, success did not function as a permanent shield for her.
That is a crucial piece of nuance to bring up. Her reality was incredibly dualistic.
Huh.
After divorcing Charles Larky, she collaborated with and married a songwriter named Rick Evers in 1977.
Right.
And according to her own candid 2012 memoir, Evers physically abused her on a regular basis.
It is incredibly difficult to reconcile what she was enduring behind closed doors with the immense comfort she was providing to the public.
It really is. It is a dark and terrifying period for her. That marriage ended tragically when Evers died of a cocaine overdose just days after they finally separated in 1978.
Just a horrific sequence of events.
And professionally, this era was also incredibly turbulent. Her 1977 album Simple Things, which she collaborated on with Evers, completely alienated critics and audiences.
Didn't Rolling Stone just tear it apart?
Brutally. They named it the worst album of 1977.
Wow. Which proves that even an absolute architectural genius of pop music can experience drastic, humiliating valleys.
No one is immune to it.
The magic isn't a permanent state you just unlock and keep forever. You have to keep fighting for it.
Yeah, and it forces us to re-examine the entire label of the singer-songwriter. Usually when we use that term, we conjure up an image of an isolated, tortured genius sitting alone in a room pouring their soul out in a vacuum.
Right, the lone artist.
But King's story, despite the deeply personal, confessional nature of her solo work, is fundamentally a story about collaboration.
She was never an island. I mean, she wrote with Jerry Goffin for a decade. She wrote the lyrics to the massive hit It's Too Late with Tony Stern.
Yep.
She collaborated closely with James Taylor. And much later in her life, she collaborated extensively with her own daughter, Louise Goffin.
Which brings up one of the most fascinating mechanics of her songwriting, the way the meanings of her songs evolved over time alongside the culture itself.
I love this concept. Think about songs as living organisms.
Yes, exactly.
They don't just exist in a frozen vacuum from the day they are recorded. They grow, they mutate, and they adapt to the cultural climate around them.
Just like King herself had to do when she moved from New York to California.
Exactly.
And the perfect example from the sources is the song Where You Lead. She had a massive hit with it originally, but as the years went on, she actually stopped performing it live.
Why did she drop it?
Well, the subservient sentiment of the original lyrics, this idea of blindly following a man wherever he goes, it really fell out of favor during the rise of the women's liberation movement in the 1970s.
Ah, that makes sense. It didn't age well.
Right. She felt the lyrics were no longer relevant to where she or society was at, so she just shelved it.
But she doesn't abandon it forever. Decades later, she reclaims the organism. She rewrites the lyrics with her daughter Louise to completely shift the context.
It's a total reinvention.
Instead of being about following a man, they make it a song about fierce female friendship and family bonds. And that mutated, evolved version became the iconic theme song for the TV show Gilmore Girls.
She even occasionally guest starred on the show as a music store owner, which is so fun.
I love that.
It is a wonderful full circle moment. She took a piece of her past that no longer fit her present, and she actively reshaped it to reflect her new, empowered reality.
So as we pull all these threads together, let's bring it back to that opening tension we talked about. The ghostwriter afraid of their own name.
Right, the fear of the spotlight.
Carole King spent her youth writing the words and the melodies for other people's lives, hiding in the safety of 1650 Broadway, behind the closed doors of a corporate hit factory.
She built the stage for everyone else.
But her true, lasting legacy, the thing that elevated her from a brilliant technician to an immortal cultural icon, wasn't forged until she risked stripping away all that heavy production, stepping up to the piano herself and letting the listener into her own living room.
It was the vulnerability that made her immortal. By stopping the factory line and allowing herself to be seen, flaws and all, she gave permission for an entire generation to do the same.
And what I find incredibly compelling in these sources is where she directed her voice when she finally found it.
Outside of music, you mean?
Yeah. We see her extensive political and environmental activism, particularly after she moved to Idaho in 1977. She spent decades working with the Alliance for the Wild Rockies. She's even testified before Congress multiple times on behalf of the Northern Rockies Ecosystem Protection Act.
It's amazing how she used that voice when she owned it.
When you look at that entire arc, it seems like her whole life has been this continuous, desperate search for harmony.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
First, she found it musically, putting the right notes together in tiny rooms to soothe other people. Then she found it personally, finally discovering her own voice and the courage to use it on stage. And finally, she sought to protect the physical harmony of the natural world.
A lifelong pursuit.
It really leaves you with something to ponder about your own life. How often do you hide your best talents behind others?
Probably more often than we'd like to admit.
How often are you waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect proxy to deliver your work, when what the world really wants, what it's really hungering for, is your raw, imperfect authenticity? Carole King proved that the real magic doesn't happen when you're writing the script for someone else. It happens when you finally start singing for yourself. Thanks for listening to People Up Pod. Keep tuning in for more stories worth knowing.